oh, well, you need to call such and such number. She says they're the ones that do that. I said, what? Why did they have that? Oh, she said, yes, my questions, and I will.
I know.
Chocolate.
I can tell you, I think
We have already been to the doctor, so therefore we can't do it.
I just ate like a bunch of chocolate yesterday.
It is genetic.
and I said, like that.
No, I probably wasn't. Was it the jar This is the most comfortable seat I've been in all day.
Well, you sure must have a busy schedule at work if you haven't had time to do much of anything else.
I generally have time to do other stuff. It's just all the other stuff I do that makes up the rest of my stuff.
It is.
So
I hated it when I did it because I had the insurance before.
Well, I thought you would have gone.
no.
And I said,
Hello.
You're here,
Let's get on down that. That is my official answer. I've been hiding. I've been hiding. No, I'm working and trying to get us trying to do everything else. So.
maybe you don't want anybody else to listen.
No, that's not it. They wanted me to be a month ago and now they want to review my medical case file. It's been doing it forever. They did it because like, my entire paycheck always goes in rent and I never have money to go and get my medical file. So it's just like, I don't know exactly what to do here. Can you put it on this? Because they said no. So it's like, something's gonna have to kind of work out for yourself. But within the past couple of weeks, I've gotten several calls from the Army, so I might have to go back to them just to go to the airport. So instead of fighting the terror force, I'm gonna
Click on that, John, and I'll see if
Army.
Well, I gotta get turned on first.
That sounds weird because I was watching the Warrior yesterday and the day before and the day before that. After I finished American, I just got talent pretty good. Ooh, the chick who won, the little girl who won America's Got Talent. I know somebody whose sister-in-law babysat her.
I didn't get it pushed.
Yeah, she's a sweet little girl. 12-year-old Darcy Lynn. She was so sweet. Dude, yeah, adorable. But I want to become an American Ninja Warrior. So I started training yesterday. I started training right now.
Just good. Doesn't want us. You're gonna have to set up.
I actually haven't done a whole lot of workout.
Keep track. You keep an eye on you.
They'll do what you want.
You need to make Kathy sit on the front row so you can keep out first. She just went to hit me.
I'm
She
trying to
said
do it now.
so.
He's not even listening.
She says on the front row I can dip her hair in the evening.
Let it go.
Okay, we're in Genesis 29th chapter. We're going to finish up.
29th chapter and get into the 30th chapter tonight.
What, we can talk about it?
In your handout, it'd be page 72, capital letter K. It says, in polygamous marriages, there are always potential problems that can develop. And then L, women often have children with false ends in minds. Leah thought 2 of her children would turn Jacob's affections to her. And then we have a little bit about Reuben, a little bit about Levi. Hi, Isaac. Glad you're feeling better. So we're going to start reading at... we'll start reading at verse 26 and read down to verse 30, and that'll get us started for tonight. 26 says, and Laban said, it must not be done so in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Remember now, Laban has given Jacob Leah in place of Rachel. So verse 27, fulfill her week, and we will give you this one also for the service, which you will serve with me still another 7 years. So as we talked about last week, Jacob Laban saw an opportunity to get some more free labor here. And verse 28, then Jacob said, and then Jacob did so and fulfilled her week. So he gave him his daughter Rachel, his wife also. And Laban gave his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as a maid. Then Jacob also went in to Rachel, and he also loved Rachel more than Leah, and he served with Laban still another 7 years. And that took us up to where we finished last week, and we'll begin at verse 31 and read through 35 tonight. As far as no new announcements, Janessa Leo is homesick. Probably picked up Jensen's sickness from last week, so she's home tonight. But I don't know of any others. But we do have a lot of folks that aren't going to get out because of the weather, and that's understandable due to their age and poor health. So we want to keep all those individuals in our prayer. Ron, would you like to lead us in prayer tonight?
Holy Divine Father in heaven, we're thankful to you for this time we have to meet with fellow saints. Thankful for your word and our opportunity to study more from your word. Pray you be with Taylor as he presents his studies for our learning, and pray you be with us as we look at the teaching that you revealed for our learning in the book of Genesis. Pray you give us the wisdom we need to make proper application of our studies to our daily lives. Thankful, Father, for the spiritual blessings we enjoy in Jesus Christ, your Son and Savior. Thankful for the redemption we have through his shed blood on the cross. We're thankful, Father, for the church arrangement, all the saints making up this whole congregation. Thankful for the time we have good fellowship with one another, encourage one another, in faith. Pray to be with those who are member that are home because of sickness, and those that are in need of their health being recovered. Pray with those in need of comfort from you, and pray, Father, all these things will be provided by your loving hand and be your will. Pray, Father, you continue to be with us in our daily activities of life. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I don't normally promote a television show, but if you haven't seen it, I would offer this suggestion to you. If you've not seen The Good Doctor, anybody seen that show?
I haven't taped, don't tell me anything about it. I'm going to watch it tomorrow.
Do what?
I haven't taped it. I'm going to watch it tomorrow. So don't
Okay.
tell me anything.
The first show was last Monday, okay?
Yeah, I had a chance to watch
All right,
it.
I'll just tell you this. It's about an autistic individual that became a physician, became a surgeon. And we do have some autistic children in this congregation. And oftentimes when you're dealing with an autistic person, you look at them differently because you think, well, they don't know how to communicate, various things like that. And sometimes they're in a different world. I truly believe after watching the first episode that people will have a much better understanding about autistic people and the fact that they can become productive adults. So you get a chance, you might just look at one episode and see what you think. Yes,
I
Don.
because our grandson is autistic. People don't
Yeah.
realize that, but they do a lot more than people realize. There's such a big, different, the spectrum's so huge that they're much smarter than people realize.
Yeah. Some are more autistic than others. Obviously, Adam is on the extreme end here in this congregation. Logan, if you ever sit with Logan, Logan's a smart individual. He really is. He knows the scriptures and stuff. So, and your grandson Jared, I see him on the Facebook all the time. He likes the weather.
Yeah.
That's his big thing.
Yeah.
So, and he's a good song leader too.
Yes,
So.
yes, thank you.
All right, so let's get into our lesson tonight. We're going to begin at verse 31. And Isaac, why don't we start with you? If you just read verses 31 through 35 for me.
When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. So Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben. For she said, the Lord has surely looked on my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me. Then she conceived again and bore a son, and said, because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, he has therefore given me this son also, and she called his name Simon. She conceived again and bore a son, and said, now this time my husband will become attached to him because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore his name was called Levi. And she conceived again and bore a son and said, Now I will praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah. Then she stopped bearing.
Okay. So when you look at these verses here and everything, as I have up there on the screen, when the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And we're going to get into Rachel a little bit more in chapter 30. But here's something interesting about Leah. Leah craved the love of her husband. But Jacob didn't love her. And so you can almost see the intervention of God here in the sense that Leah did have a child, and the child's name was Reuben. Now, Reuben means, look, a son. Now, that's important because the firstborn, the goal was to always have a boy, firstborn, because he got the birthrights and everything. And so she says, look, a son, because God has looked upon my affliction, for now my husband will love me. It didn't happen. So she acknowledges God's gifts and displays hope that this will change Jacob's attitude towards her. Simeon was the next. And Simeon means hearing, heard, or famous. At this time, she says, because God had heard that I am hated, he has given me this son also. Again, she acknowledges God in the naming of this son. Hello, Debbie. Now she's going to have a third son. And this third son's name is Levi. Levi means joined or attached to. This time, she says, my husband will be attached to me because I have borne him 3 sons. Leah says at his birth, here she does not attribute the child to God, but her attitude is one of optimism and hope that Jacob will change his outlook toward her. But it hasn't happened. So, what happens? She has a 4th child. The fourth child's name is Judah. Judah means praised. And this time she says, I will praise God, because God has given her 4 sons in hopes that her husband would love her. But it didn't happen. Any comments on chapter 29? All right, let's look at chapter 30 then. In chapter 30, in your handout, it would be page 73, and he labels it Jacob's increase. This is Victor Eskew, Jacob's increase. Title could be Jacob's sons and Jacob's flocks, or Jacob's increase, boys and a bargain, 7 sons, 1 daughter, and much cattle. Because Jacob is becoming very wealthy here in this situation. Also, another individual by the name of Kevin Walker says it could be called Desperate Housewives.
Well, Leah was desperate.
Leah was desperate. So was Rachel.
Look how long that Jacob had to work for Rachel, and he got Leah.
Yeah, but look what Rachel did.
And Daddy caused all this.
Yeah, Daddy caused all this junk.
11 sons.
Yeah, but at
He
this
said
point,
7.
yeah, at this point, 7 sons, but eventually 11 sons.
And 30, he ends up 30 with 11 sons.
Okay. All right.
I was just saying, where he ends 30 with the...
Okay.
At the end of 30, he has 11 sons.
Okay, so there's misprint here. I'm just reading off Victor Eskew's.
Well, he
And
can't
I've
count.
noticed a couple of misprints, so
He can't count.
obviously. All right, so the key verse that he uses is Genesis, the 30th chapter, verses 25 and 26, where he says, And it came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph that Jacob said unto Laban, Send me away that I may go unto mine own place and to my country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served thee, and let me go, for thou knowest my service which have done thee. So, which I have done thee. So this is the key verse that he lists. So now let's look at some of the lessons here. First off, what we have here is a great love story of Jacob, and it's a familiar love story. he saw the beautiful Rachel. This was who he fell in love the first time he saw her, and he worked 7 years for her. He was willing to work that 7 years for her marriage. But even though it was 7 years, to Jacob the years flew by very quickly because of the love of this maiden. So then upon being deceived by Laban, he was willing to work another 7 years to be the husband of the woman he loved so dearly. However, he was allowed to marry her before the second set of 7 years. Yes, John?
You notice it doesn't say the second 7 flew by.
No, it does not. But look at Genesis 29 again in verse 27 through 30, because it appears that Jacob was allowed to marry Rachel before that 7 years was up, okay? And that may be one reason why, John, it doesn't say the 7 years flew by, okay? Because in verse 27 it says, "Fulfill her week, and we will give you this one also for the service which you will serve with me still another 7 years." So you see that future tense there. Then Jacob did so and fulfilled her week, so he gave him his daughter Rachel as wife also, and Laban gave his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as a maid. Okay? So we see here then that there is the suggestion. Verse 30, "Then Jacob also went into Rachel, and he also loved Rachel more than Leah, and he served with Laban still another 7 years." So it was after that week, apparently, that he was allowed to go ahead and marry Rachel. He just had to allow the firstborn child, Leah, to have her week. Okay? All right, so, however, the great love story told in Jacob's life is not his great love for Rachel. But he learned, as we will see, that he learned to love Leah. And in the end, it was Leah who had the greater hold on his heart. And we'll see that as we look at this, okay?
Leah's the one he buried beside him in the tomb.
That's true. That's true. All right. So, do what?
I said it's like a twisted Romeo and Juliet.
Almost. Except there was no death
killing
here.
each other in the end, killing themselves in the end. He falls in love with her sister.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so I have up here the naming of children, hints of character. We're going to look at, again, we'll not take time to read it because we just looked at it, Genesis 29, verses 31. But it also goes through Genesis chapter 30, verse 24. And then we could look at Genesis chapter 35, verses 16 through 18. Let's just look at Genesis 35, verses 16 through 18 real quick. If I remember right, that's... Ron, read verses 16 through 18, if you will, of Genesis 35.
Then they journeyed from Bethel, and when there was but a little distance to go to Ephrath, Rachel labored in childbirth, and she had hard labor. Now it came to pass, when she was in hard labor, that the midwife said to her, "Do not fear, you will have this son also." So it was, as her soul was departing, for she died, that she called his name Ben-Oni, but his father called him Benjamin.
Okay. So you see then, as I was saying, the naming of children, hints of character, and we can see that in Genesis 29, verses 31 through 30, let's see here. Yeah, verses 31 through 30. And that goes back to Leah naming her sons. Remember Reuben? Look, a son is born. And then Simeon, hearing, heard, famous. Levi, joined, attached to. And then finally Judah, praised as her fourth child, okay?
Reuben was the one who didn't want to kill Joseph.
True, very true. And we'll see that later on as well. Here we go. It's just a little slow there. All right, so look at verses 1 through 8 of chapter 30. And Debbie, you feel like reading 8 verses?
And when Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said unto Jacob, Give me children, or else I die. And Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said, Am I in God's stead? Who hath withheld from thee the fruit of the womb? And she said, Behold, my maiden Bilhah, go in unto her, and she shall bear upon my knees, that I may also have children by her. And she gave him Bilhah, her handmaid, to wife. And Jacob went unto her, and Bilhah conceived and bare Jacob a son. And Rachel said, God hath judged me, and hath also heard my voice, and hath given me a son. Therefore called she his name Dan. And Bilhah, Rachel's maid, conceived again, and bare Jacob a second son. And Rachel said, With great wrestlings I wrestled with my sister, and I have prevailed. And his name is
Naphtali. Okay. You see in these first 8 verses a couple of things. Number one, Rachel is really stressed out that Leah has now had 4 sons and she still has not had a child. And so basically she says to Jacob, if I can't bear a son, just take my life. Kill me. And Jacob says, well, wait a minute, I'm not God. We know it wasn't Jacob's fault because she couldn't have children. There was something else going on. God had an intervention here. But in a real world situation also, sometimes when 2 people, husband and wife, are stressed out trying to have a child, and this was the case with Rachel, oftentimes their womb is closed up. And then when some situation comes along, like adopting a child or something else, relieves all that stress and everything, suddenly they're able to produce a child. But Rachel's not willing to wait. Rachel's not willing to trust God on this thing. And so she takes Bilhah and she gives Bilhah to Jacob. And that's where we see that phrase, she will bear a child on my knees, but I also may have children by her. So who was the first child? Dan. Which means judge or judgment. And that's why Rachel says, God has judged my case, and he has also heard my voice and given me a son. It was Rachel that named this boy, not Bilhah. Okay? It would seem that Rachel is referring to the ongoing sibling rivalry that we saw there in verse 8 between her and Leah in the naming of this child. Judge or judgment, okay? Rachel is saying that God has judged in favor of her, and the birth of Dan through Bilhah is evidence of the verdict, is basically what she's saying. Naphtali, the word means my wrestling, and this is Bilhah's second child. Rachel says, with great wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister, and indeed I have prevailed. And so she names him Naphtali, my wrestling. And it was Rachel who named this child also, not Bilhah. Rachel fails to acknowledge God in the birth of this son, using his name only as an opportunity to boast of a victory over her sister. And so you see the sibling rivalry taking place here. Any comments through verse 8?
I'm not sure how she has victory because she only has 2 sons.
Do what now?
How does she have victory when she's only got 2 sons?
Well, in reality, she didn't have 2 sons. They were Bilhah's, and we're going to see that later on.
Kind of reminds me of Abraham and Sarah with their little episode when it seems like it's playing out like it never ends well.
Yeah.
It never ends well. So, I mean, and it's like repeating itself. I mean, with Abraham and Sarah, correct?
And what you're saying, Isaac, there, it never ends well when we exclude God from our plans.
Amen.
And this is exactly what Rachel has done. All right, so now we have Zilpah, verses 9 through 13. Sharon, you feel like reading that?
Yeah.
When Leah saw that she had stopped bearing, she took Zilpah, her maid, and gave her to Jacob as wife. And Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, "A troop comes," so she called his name Gad. And Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, "I am happy, for the daughters will call me blessed." So she called his name Asher.
Okay. This goes down to capital letter E in your handout on page 74. Okay? So Leah obviously was not immune to the sin of envy and discontent. You still see that sibling rivalry here, because she saw that Rachel had obtained children through her handmaid. So what does she do? She seeks to do the same thing. And this was certainly one of the low points in Leah's spiritual development. Gad was the first. And Leah was the one that named this child. Not Zilpah, but Leah named it. And she named him Gad, which means fortune or troop. Notice what she said. A troop comes. Alright? Asher was the second child. And again, Leah says, "I am happy, for the daughters will call me blessed." Asher means happy or fortunate. So in naming these two sons, there is no reference to the Lord. Perhaps that is fitting, since these sons were born in polygamy, as Leah strove to outproduce her sister. Polygamy was regulated and thus allowed under Mosaic law. Jesus makes it clear, though, that such an arrangement has never been pleasing to God. If we go to Matthew, the 19th chapter, verses 4 through 9, you have that, John?
And he answered and said unto them, Have ye not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. Wherefore they are no more twain but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man put asunder. They said unto him, Why did Moses then write a command to give a writing of divorcement, to put her away? And he said unto them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, suffered you to put away your wives. From the beginning it was not so. And I say unto you, whosoever put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery, and whosoever marrieth her which is put away doth commit adultery.
Now, keep in mind, Leah is still trying to get the affection of her husband at this point. Okay? She's competing with her sister, but in each of the names of these two children that Zilpah provided for her, there is a reference to happiness and to the continued optimism that constantly shone through Leah's character. Still hoping that Jacob is going to love her. Yes, Sharon?
Did you say Leah was committing polygamy?
No, I'm saying Jacob is committing polygamy.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that...
You only said it when Leah did it. Why wasn't it polygamy when Rachel did it?
It was. It
Oh,
was.
okay.
I'm just saying, all I said here was polygamy was regulated and thus allowed under
Yeah.
the Mosaic law.
Okay.
Okay, but polygamy is rampant here with these two women and their handmaidens. You're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jacob is.
Yeah.
Well, it started with Abraham.
Well, yeah, it started with
I thought
Abraham.
it was called a concubine, but
Yeah. All right, so let's look at verses 14 through 21. And in your handout, it really begins with capital letter F and goes through capital letter G, okay? Kathy, you want to read verses 14 through 21 for me, please?
Now Reuben went in the days of wheat harvest, and found mandrakes in the field, and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, Please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But she said to her, Is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also? And Rachel said, Therefore he will lie with you tonight for your son's mandrakes. When Jacob came out of the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, You must come in to me, for I have surely hired you with my son's mandrakes. And he lay with her at that night. And God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. Leah said, God has given me my wages, because I have given my maid to my husband. So she called his name Ishkar. Then Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a sixth son. And Leah said, God has endowed me with good endowment. Now my husband will dwell with me, because I have borne him 6 sons. So she called his name Zebulun. Afterward she bore a daughter and called her name Dinah.
So the plot thickens here. What do we know about Jacob now? He's just been hired.
He's easily pulled from one to the other.
Yeah. What would you call a man that was hired to...
Escort. So that's what mandrake means then?
Nope. We'll talk about mandrake. All right, so...
That's my question.
All right, hang on. We'll get there. First off, Ishkar is born next. And at his birth, Leah says, God has given me my wages because I have given my maid to my husband. So, what do you think Ishkar means? Issachar.
Wages.
It means reward or wages. Okay, so now this next... Huh?
It don't mean cow.
You're still stuck on that, aren't you, John?
He's been on it all week.
I looked it up, and that was the third or fourth definition.
So?
There's two in front of it.
You accept the first two. I'll accept that third or fourth one. Zebulun. This is the last of Leah's sons. Okay? At his birth, Leah says, God has endowed me with a good endowment. Now my husband will dwell with me because I have borne him 6 sons. So Zebulun means dwelling or neighbor. So again we see Leah acknowledging God in naming of the son with a word of hope that Jacob would esteem her more highly. Alright? Now getting back to your question, Isaac, about mandrakes.
Yeah, what's Dinah mean?
What's what?
The women don't
The
mean
girl's
anything.
name.
Well, we haven't got there yet.
Well, she just read it.
Yeah, but we're not there yet. So hang on, okay?
All right.
So we have a hint here at the character of Leah and Rachel, don't we? Leah is always grateful to God. She's always happy. She's always optimistic that Jacob is going to finally love her. Rachel, though, is always self-serving. And there seems to be an indication that she's immature here. Yes, John?
Rachel's never shown to be very godly
No.
at all.
Which would suggest her immaturity. She's not satisfied with what she has. She had the love of Jacob, but she's not content with that. She wants more. Wanting the one thing that Leah had alone, constantly searching for evidence in the children's births that she has prevailed. When God, in His mercy, does give Rachel a child, she immediately does what? She immediately asks for another one. The answer to that request ends in her death. Remember Ron read Genesis 35? Where she memorializes memorializes him by naming the son, "You killed me," is what that means.
You killed me?
Yeah, that's what the name of that boy means.
The baby did. I mean, having the baby did.
Yeah.
Benjamin means?
Huh?
That's what Benjamin means?
Yes.
Did you kill me?
Yes. So here's Rachel's failings.
That's heavy.
Rachel's failings we see first off in Genesis chapter 30, her attempted pregnancy. When Rachel saw that she could not bear children, what did she do?
Gave her leave
Same
service.
thing Sarah did.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
what was one
exactly.
thing she did not do that she should have done?
Ask God.
She didn't go to God. She didn't ask God or look to God for help. First, she demands children of Jacob in verse 1 of Genesis 30, as if it is his fault that she cannot bear children. But we know that's not true because he and Leah had children. So then she gives Jacob her handmaid, verse 3. Yes, John.
He did refer to God when he said, am I in the place of God?
Well, he did, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. He
Yeah.
did.
But she didn't go to God.
Yeah, she didn't take the referral.
Right. So since Jacob knew the history of Hagar and Ishmael, he should have immediately rejected this handmaiden that Rachel was offering. So thirdly, she attempts the use of mandrakes. Now,
That's what
to answer
we
your
know
question,
it is.
we don't know what they are.
Okay. Well, what do you think they are? Let me get
Modern
that, put that out
dictionary
there.
says it's a root similar to a potato.
Yeah. It does. That's
Well,
what it says.
There are
I
some.
looked it up.
Good for you, John. There are some translations that are commentaries that suggest that it means lilies. And lilies, of course, have a tuber.
Yeah.
Okay. There are others that suggest it's jasmine, and others citrons. Others suggest it's mushrooms. Others figs. And some think the word means flowers or fine flowers in general.
I just looked it up. It's right here. It says the mandragora is a plant genus belonging to the nightshade family, so it's a flower.
Yeah, that's what I say. But there are several commentaries because that's what you just looked up was that person's opinion. Okay? The point is, it's not important what it was. What is important about what took place here is there was a situation put in place here that Jacob was given so the son could have some mandrakes. Yes, John?
One of it is Leah had them and Rachel wanted them.
Exactly right. So, finally though, in verse 22, if you look at that, it says, Then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb. So after all of this, now Rachel has finally turned to God and appeals to Him, and God has heard her. Only as a last resort, then does she ask God for help.
Didn't she come from a family that worshipped idols?
That was what?
Didn't her Laban worship idols?
Yes.
Laban was an idol worshiper.
Yes, he was. Yes. In fact, that whole family up there in Haran was idol worshippers.
So that's what they knew.
Yeah, that's why God had Abraham and his nephew, why they left there and was go to a land where God would tell them to go, because they were faithful and God got them out of that idolatrous situation. Okay. Now let's look at Leah's virtues for just a second here. Yes, John.
Abraham didn't send her to get Isaac a wife because of the religious standing.
He sent his servant.
Because of the bloodline.
Yeah, right.
The same way with Jacob. He didn't go because of religion. He went because of the bloodline.
Right. Exactly right. Good point. All right, so let's look at Leah's virtues for just a moment. First, what we see about Leah is that she's a woman who seeks to give glory to God and who always has an optimistic outlook on things. When Leah gave birth to her first 4 children, she attributed them all to God. This displays her understanding of the covenant and her faith in God. Leah looked to God almost immediately. It is stated even more clearly at the birth of Issachar, where we are told that God listened to Leah. Leah, understanding the true nature of the covenant, God, developed a prayer life almost immediately. She was far from perfect, though. Whatever part Leah played in the deception of Jacob at their wedding certainly deserves consideration, because she knew Jacob loved Rachel. She knew that Rachel was promised to Jacob, so she had to be maybe involved in that deception a little bit. I'm just supposing that. Yes, Donna?
I'm thinking her father probably made her.
Well, very well could
I'm
have.
thinking, plus she wanted to get, the only way she's going to get married is this way, so she went along with it.
Very well could have. But she could have told Jacob in the tent there, hey, I'm not Rachel. She didn't do that, though.
She didn't want to.
Well, she'd
No.
been around him for 7 years. She may have grown to love him whether he loved her or not.
Well, she did love him. This is the whole point, is she was
ain't
looking
gonna
for
tell
his...
him that she ain't, that she's not Rachel.
So, in giving, in addition, her imitation of Rachel then, and giving her handmaid to secure more children, is also deserving of a rebuke. After all, she had the first 4 children. She didn't need more, but there was some envy there. The envy in her heart during the sibling rivalry should not be condoned, and her explanation for the birth of Issachar seems to be based on a faulty premise. Finally, what stands out about Leah, however, are her virtues, especially her understanding of God, and the covenant that he made with Jacob and his fathers. So Leah had some excellent qualities about her, where Rachel was demonstrating a very immature and selfish quality. Any comments up through?
Well, I guess I want to explain about Leah's dependence on God. She mentioned him a couple of times, and here that's true. But then Rachel, when she bore a son, she said, God has vindicated me.
Well, that's what I say.
She has some feeling toward God, too. And I know she was a selfish person, but in that day and time, it was very, when I think of Hannah, she didn't have children, and how upset she was. And that was a normal thing.
Yeah. And I agree with you, Mary. What I'm saying is that Rachel eventually did turn to God and ask God for help, but she didn't do that initially. Whereas Leah did that.
We know of.
Yeah, Leah did that initially. Sharon?
Don't you think it's kind of funny you say Laban was an idol worshiper? That wouldn't Rachel and Leah be an idol worshiper too, and now they're turning to God?
Well, obviously the scriptures don't tell us all of that and everything, but Abraham was not an idol worshiper, and yet his father was. And his.
I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, but
Leah would be that.
Obviously they knew about God up there, and apparently there were some who worshiped God, and there were some who worshipped idols. And that kind of comes out with Abraham. Yes, John?
Well, the way I read it is Leah's comments was giving the glory to God.
Yes.
Rachel's comments was more or less saying her glory because of God.
Yes.
So her attitude still hadn't changed.
Has
that
changed.
much.
Yeah, it hasn't changed that much, but it has changed a little bit, suggesting that she is now turning to
If
God.
they hadn't given the servant girls to Jacob, there wouldn't be 12 tribes.
That's true. That's true. That's the problem with polygamy. Do what?
To me, it sounds like Rachel's acting like a immature 12-year-old brat.
Yeah,
Well, she is the younger one.
that's true.
Well, they
All
don't
right.
say how
I'm
old she
younger
is.
than all my other siblings. Well, most of my siblings, but I don't act like an immature brat.
Well,
A selfish one
no.
at that.
You said that Leah did never say anything. Leah actually did say something that kind of stands out to me. She says, "Happy am I, for the daughters will call me blessed." I mean, to me, that's like patting her chest and saying, "Look at me." I mean, that statement, I don't appreciate that statement, because she's like, now I'm all that.
Yeah.
You know,
She's
and
puffing
she
her
needs-
chest.
Yeah, and that's
But
not
you
really
got to look
God.
at the
That's
culture
not really-
too, and she just bore 4 sons.
Like female
I
blessings.
You know.
understand, but she's kind
And the
of,
sons,
if we're picking on
Doing
Rachel,
this.
let's pick on a little bit of Leah, because Leah's got her, you know, she's saying that too.
well,
She's
Leah
kinda
did what was
saying that
credit
out
to God
loud.
for having the kid, the
Yeah.
son.
But look at
Just said that the people were going to look at her favorably because of having the son.
Look at verses 22 through 24. This is what I've already told you about, but I'll just read it real quick. It says, "Then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb." So there's evidence right there that Rachel apparently prayed to God, okay? "And she conceived and bore a son, and said, God has taken away my reproach. So she called his name Joseph, and said, The Lord shall add to me another son." And then Ron read Genesis 35, verses 16 through 19, where she had her last son, Benjamin, and named him a name that says, "You killed me." All right, so Let's look at verses 25 and 26 real quick.
I think that would have made him feel really bad if he knew his name.
Well, it could have.
Why he changed his name?
It could have, yeah.
Father changed his name.
Yeah, that's true. All right, look at verses 25 and 26. Pat, you want to read that for me, please?
And it came to pass when Rachel had born Joseph that Jacob had said to Laban, "Send me away, that I may go to my own place and my own country. Give me my wives and children, and whom I have served you for. Let me go, for you know my service which I have done for you."
Okay, now we may not be able to get finished with this, but we'll try. This is capital letter I, page 74 in your handout, all right? So Joseph's birth coincided with the ending of the second 7 years. And thus we would understand that the birth of his sons are not recorded chronologically, but simply grouped by the mother. Leah bore first. Sometime while bearing the first 4, Bilhah bore also. Then Zilpah bore, and then Leah again finally. Rachel bore last. Remember who had the girl? Leah had the girl. Her name was Dinah. Okay?
And what does Dinah mean?
I don't know. I didn't look it
You
up.
say that before instead of we'll get to that later.
No, we were talking about the mandrakes.
No, we was talking about Dinah, because I asked you when it was first read what Dinah meant, and you said we'll get to that later.
All right, I'll look it up. I was answering Isaac's question about the mandrakes, but I'll look it up. Means what?
Judgment.
Okay, Dinah means judgment. Take that.
I would go along with the flyers for the mandrakes because the kid can't be over 7.
True. All right.
I just wondered how many children did Zilpah bear?
2.
2.
Just 2.
2.
Everybody, all of them but Rachel bore 2.
Leah bore 5, 4 boys and a
6.
6. Right, 6 boys. 6 and a girl. Okay,
6
was
boys and
included in
girls,
that.
7 kids.
And Rachel had 2 children. Zilpah had 2, and Bilhah had 2. Total of 12, and there were 13 actually counting the girl. Okay. So his statement about "send me away that I may go to my own place and to my country." The significance of this decision, there we go with the bell, coming after the birth of Joseph, is that it bound Rachel to him by child. More importantly, Jacob's words express a desire to fulfill his vow, going back to Genesis 28, verses 20 through 22. The land is his by promise in Genesis 28, verse 4 and 13. This was the vow that his father had given him. So he must go back to claim this inheritance. And so Jacob seeks Laban's acknowledgement that he had fulfilled the contract, and this acknowledgement would be given by allowing him to depart with his wives and children. His appeal is based on his record of service. All right, that takes us to verse 27, which we'll get to next week.